Hi folks, how's all doing? So I'm going to do a bit of scenery work on the layout today. Going to make the hill behind me there look a bit more like a hill and less like a big lump of plaster. Okay, so the first thing to do is to paint up the areas that are going to be exposed rock. Now, as you can see, I've already done the bottom bit along here, and all I did was painted on some dark grey, greyish brown acrylic paint, and then put layers of different colours of grey on top of that, just using a dry brushing technique. So the bit up here I'm going to finish off today, I've already got the dark, it's actually a very dark greyish brown colour, and I'm going to add on the different colours of grey onto that. So I'm just going to mix together some white and black acrylic. There's no rights or wrongs here, you know, rock can be many different colours, but this is what I do. So I'm going to be using a kind of a dry brushing technique, so we don't want a lot of paint on the brush, and then just lightly go over it. Using the dry brushing technique, you're just catching the high points of the plaster, and it just gives a kind of three-dimensional effect, which is quite good. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry. It will dry a little bit darker, it tends to soak in a little bit, and then I'll go over it with a lighter shade of grey. Okay, so slightly paler grey. It always dries a bit darker, so this will be fine. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry off. I might go over it again here and there with some different shades. I might even add a wee bit of green in here and there. But once the paint's dry, then we can start thinking about adding in some scatter and some static grass and get the greenery in. Okay, so I'm going to add some static grass and some scatter. The static grasses that I'm going to use is 2mm summer grass and 2mm spring grass. I like to use nice short static grasses. I do have a static grass applicator thingy, but I don't use it. Not, at least I don't plug it in. I did try doing static grass. You know, you connect this up to your scenery essentially, shake this on, and the grass is supposed to stand up and end. That's kind of the theory. I actually ended up giving myself quite a nasty electric shock with this thing. But yeah, it works, but it's very difficult to fix the static grass so it still stands up and end. And I just found it much easier to build a more robust landscape using very short static grass and not bothering with the applicator. So just get it on any way you can. I do still use this just for the sieve on the end, because it's just a nice way to spread it on nice and evenly, but I don't use the electrical part of it. I'll also put some blended turf foliage on. I just scatter that on by hand, and I might add some of this rough pasture scatter here and there. I'm not sure about that. And also put on some of this sand, which I actually just picked up from a field. Alright, okay, first things first though, we want to get some PVA down. So just ordinary PVA, be fairly liberal with it. So just spread it on wherever you want your static grass and scatter to be. Just going to overlap it with the rock face a little bit. And it's quite a good idea to put some on the rock face, so you get a wee bit of grass growing on the rocks as well. Just put some glue in a saucer. As you can see, when it comes to scenery, I'm kind of slapdash. I don't agonise over it and strive for any kind of perfection. Life's too short. You know, there's nothing wrong with doing scenery that's super realistic if you've got the time and the skill to do it. I have neither, so I do what works for me, which is kind of just batter everything on. This layer of PVA is really just for the first layer of static grass or scatter to get a hold. Once that's done, any additional layer will stick to what's already there fine, and then of course you spray it all over with glue when it's done. Okay, so I'm just going to put on this summer green. Just use fingers to apply it in awkward places. Which is going to go all over the track and everything, but that's going to hoover up. And then we're just going to add some of this paler green. You don't want it all the same shade of green, so a bit of variety makes a huge difference. I hate the way static grass tends to clump together like that. Now I'm going to sprinkle some of this blended turf on here and there. This gives a different texture in places. There we go, that'll do. You can see little bits of PVA glue showing through white, but remember PVA dries clear, so they'll disappear. I'm going to do this bit along here as well, and then we'll let that dry a little bit before we spray some thin PVA over it. One of the advantages of keeping the static grass and scattering that short like this and not using the the 4mm static grass all standing up on end is it's relatively easy to go over it with a hoover to dust it. So that's something you really have to think about with a model railway, is how do you keep the thing reasonably clean. So it's a lot easier if you keep your static grass short. Just going to sprinkle on some of this sand, which is just stuff I picked up off a field. Just having a little bit of brown into the mixture is a good idea. So I'm going to let that sit, and then we'll hoover up all the loose stuff. I'll probably leave in all the stuff that's fallen down in here actually, but the stuff that's on the track and here, there and everywhere, we'll get rid of that, and then we'll spray over it with some watered down PVA. Okay, so I've hoovered up all the mess, and I've got some heavily watered down PVA and a plant sprayer. So I'm just going to very gently go over this and spray it with PVA. Pull this paper away actually. Okay, so that'll take a good while to dry, and we'll see how well fixed down it is. Sometimes it needs a second spray, but I think that'll probably be alright. And once it's dry, we can start to add some bushes and a little bit of foliage here and there. Okay, so next day, this is nice and dry and it's all pretty well stuck down. So I can now get some bushes stuck onto it. So I'm going to use some of this stuff. It's the bush foliage. Really, really good stuff. Not exactly cheap, but really effective. I've also got the bushes from the old layout, so we'll use as much of that as possible. So I'm just going to dab on some PVA, Great stuff this, it's so versatile. You know, you can use it for hedges or foliage growing up the side of a building, for bushes, or you could break it right down into little bits to make it look like just weeds. It's really good stuff. I like this one because it's got that bit of variation in the shades of green. This was in the box of stuff that Jason sent me. Another good glue I've been using recently is this stuff, FlexiBond. It's pretty much like PVA, but dries a bit quicker, and it's a stronger bond, I think. So it's good for gluing on bushes and things. You can just squeeze some of this on. Okay, I'm going to crack on, get the rest of these bushes on. Takes a bit of time to do, but it's quite fun to do, I find. It's quite creative in a way, and it's instantly gratifying to see the result. You know, it really brings the landscape to life. So I'll crack on with it. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I'll probably add some more bushes and trees over time, especially once I've got the backdrop in place. Maybe add some yellow blossom onto the bushes to make it look like gorse in bloom, and maybe some fences and walls or something. Maybe a wee bit of purple heather as well. But that lets you see how I go about doing my landscape. It can be done pretty quickly, and as I said, it's not done to look realistic necessarily. It's done to just be effective. I've done a bit more around the engine shed. I've got some cobbles in, which is just embossed card that I washed over with some watered down black paint. I'm adding in some fencing and stuff, and I plan to have lots of wee bits and pieces in here, you know, things like ladders, piles of rubbish, junk, etc. All stuff that's fun to add in over time. Next up though is this area here. The first thing I want to do is to put some sort of bridge under the track about here, to have a road coming round going into this area. And once that's done, I'll move on to the goods area in here, and then on to the removable section, and then this area here, which I haven't really given an awful lot of thought to be honest, but we shall see where we go with that. Righto folks, up next is a repair request, and after that I may do something about the amp meters, which a few people have asked about, and I've got a pile of coaches awaiting magnetic couplings, the ones I bought at Cooper, and also some donated ones. But meantime, I'm going to crack on with the layout, so in the next update, hopefully, all this area will be pretty much done, or close to it anyway. Okay folks, catch you later.